Shalom Aleichem, Assalamu Alaikum, Irini Mazisu, Pax Vobiscum, peace be unto you. Today we're going to look at 1 Samuel chapter 6, 1 Kingdoms chapter 6, and we've got a lot to cover, so let's just get into it. 21 verses to look at. 21 verses in the chapter, I should say. And the first verse, we have an omission of, and their land brought forth swarms of mice. These are armies of mice, literal armies. Second verse, another omission, and it's a significant one, significant difference. They omitted that the Philistines had enchanters, or in other words, magicians or sorcerers. That's an important factoid. Verse 3, another omission, yet again. Do not on any account send it away empty. Do not on any account is the express instruction. But by all means, render to it an offering. Okay, that was not omitted, that part, but more of the in any wise. Okay, by all means, in any wise. It says do not on any account. So on any account was the part that was omitted. And then the second part is, but by all means render to it an offering for a plague, or for the plague. So we can see a plague is occurring. Versus, but in any wise, in any way, in any case, return him a trespass offering. And there's no mention of the plague. So the plague was omitted as well. So I'll put that in there as well. I'm just going to type it down here. Oh, actually, just leave it there. And then put omission, the plague. Next, we have another significant difference in the same verse. It says, shall not his hand be thus stayed from off you. Verses, and it shall be known to you why his hand is not removed from you. So the difference is, let's just read it slowly. Should not his hand be stayed? So won't his hand be removed from you? The plague will be halted. It will be halted and then removed after you make the atonement. And even the word atonement was omitted as well. An atonement shall be made for you. And then we see in the Masoretic, it's not expressed that way. His hand won't be stayed. The plague will not stop. The plague will not be removed. It just says, it shall be known to you. Why? So the reason will be known to you, but the solution will not be addressed. There will be no solution. So one is offering the solution. It will stop. The plague will stop. Versus the reason why. You'll know the reason why. So you will know the reason why. So I'm just typing it out here on my phone. You will know the reason why. Next is verses 4 to 5. And there are omissions here as well. It says, and on the people in verse 5. So it's not just the lords of the Philistines and the rulers who were being plagued. It was on the general populace, the citizens of Philistia, of those surrounding areas. There are actual towns being named. They'll be named later on in the chapter, you'll see. But the people were suffering as a result. Verse 5 is a redundancy in the Masoretic. I'm not going to read it all, but that's just a redundancy. It doesn't have to be repeated because it was essentially said in verse 4. They just reiterate it in verse 5. So what they're saying is, you should do what is mentioned in verse 4. That's what they're saying, essentially, in the Masoretic. In verse 6, we have a significant difference. It says here, was it not so that when he mocked them, talking about Adonai, mocking them through the plagues, that they, the Egyptians, let the people, Israel, go, and they departed. So my interpretation of this is Elohim, Adonai, mock them, not talking to the Egyptians like he's mocking them. He's mocking their false Elohim, the many gods of Egypt, because each plague was targeted towards a different Elohim of Egypt. Versus the Masoretic is saying it this way: when he had wrought wonderfully among them, did they not let the people go, and they departed. So there's no mention of any mocking going on, or Elohim of Egypt being inferred or implied. It's simply talking about how the Egyptians saw the wonders and they decided to let them go. And that's not what happened, because each time a miracle would happen, or I should say a plague would occur, we know that Pharaoh's heart was just hardened even more. So he was not convinced to let them go until that last plague with the death of the firstborn. So it wasn't the wonders that convinced them to let them go. It was the last plague, where it was just so devastating to everyone, including animals. Okay, next we're going to look at verse 7. Let me just pause it for a moment because it requires me to look up a definition. Okay, so in verse 7, it describes take 2 cows versus milch kine, the Masoretic. So milch kine are dairy milk cows. That's what that means. It's more specific in the Masoretic as to what kind of cows they are. However, in verse 7, there is an omission of that have calved for the first time without their calves. So that portion was omitted that I'm highlighting there. In the Masoretic, it reads this way: on which has come no yoke. So not that they've never given birth for the first time, but there has never been a yoke on them. But they're saying in the Septuagint is these cows have to have given birth for the first time only, and are also without their calves. So you're going to separate them from their babies. Verse 8, and you shall let it go, talking about the cart or the wagon with the ark on it, and send it away, and you shall depart. You will be dismissed. You will leave, or just leave it, perhaps. In verse 9, we can see affliction. It's brought a great affliction, which is related to the plague, versus great evil. And then touched, the hand has not touched us, versus hand has not smote us. Verse 10, calved for the first time again, versus milch, and took 2 dairy milk cows again. So it's nothing to do with them giving birth, it's just to do with their milk production. Doesn't make any sense because there's nothing in relation to milk in this chapter. Verse 12, went, so we can see what they did, the cows. They went straight on the way to the way of Beth Shemesh. So they instantly knew which way to go. They went the way they should go immediately, straight on. They just went straight on. In the Masoretic, it is expressed this way, versus they took the straight way. So they took the straight way, which seems to be describing that, describes the way being straight. So the way they took was a straight way, not curvy or anything. It was just a straight way to the way of Beth Shemesh. So the road to Beth Shemesh was straight, instead of describing the manner that the cows took, which was just straight away. They went straight to the way. So you can see that, what was determined, what they should do as the sign, it was just instantaneous. They knew, they got confirmation of what whether his hand did it, the hand of Adonai, because that was the sign that they asked for. They said, "You shall see if it goes along the way, or goes the way of its coasts, then he has brought upon us this great affliction." So that was the confirmation that they were asking for, and they got it straight away. They went straight on. And not to say that it wasn't confirmed in both, but it was just more immediate in the Septuagint. Okay, and then it also describes how they went along one track. So it's very specific. They went on one track. They didn't deviate from that one track, versus they went along the highway. Now I know modern highways are massive. They're 8 lanes and all that, very wide expanse of road. But no, in ancient times it wasn't a wide expanse of road. It was just a road. It wasn't 8 lanes. It was a road. In any case, they did go that way. And so the other difference I noticed is they labored. So they worked. They were working to, working, not working in the sense of cows plowing a field, for instance. No, their labor, the labor that is being referred to here is them just moving. They're traveling. Traveling is labor. They're working in terms of exerting their energy. But in the Masoretic, it doesn't say that they labored. It says lowing as they went. So they're bellowing. They're making their cow noises. The sound that cows make. That's what they're doing. Verse 13. The men of Beth Shemesh. So it's specific as to who is reaping. It's not just they of Beth Shemesh. It's not just the general populace. And the reason why I point this out is because reaping, as I mentioned or not just mentioned, as we read in the book of Ruth, was the job of men. Men did the reaping, women did the gathering. So we can see in Beth Shemesh, they maintained this order, these gender roles, as you can call them. And then it says, meet it. They rejoiced to meet it when they saw the ark of Adonai, versus they rejoiced just to see it. So there seems to be more intimate encounter with the ark, not just looking at it, but they met it. Maybe they even touched it. I'm not sure. But it doesn't say anything about them touching it, so let's not speculate. Verse 14, and they sat there. It says they sat there, comma, and I'm inserting a comma just to make sense of the verse. Otherwise, it's they sat there by it, a great stone. So it sounds like they picked up a big rock, a big great stone. They moved it. However they did that, they moved the stone, but it doesn't make any sense. But the Masoretic actually gives us a little more insight into where that punctuation should be. So I inserted a comma after the word there. So they sat there, okay, comma, and we can insert and, the word and by it was a great stone, or there was a great stone, as the Masoretic helps us understand there. So Masoretic is helping us, shockingly enough, at least the translators are, because those are inserted words. There was. So that makes sense in both. So they didn't bring a great stone, it was already there. Okay. Verse 15, it says, brought up. They brought up the ark of Adonai. So they restored it to where it should be, perhaps, or they just brought it up where they're going to, versus they took it down. They took down the ark, and it seems they put it on the stone. But in any case, they're bringing up the ark. Could be bringing it up on the stone. That's what it seems to imply. Okay, so they're bringing up the ark, not restoring it. Sorry, I made a mistake there. They brought up the ark on the stone. So that's where they put it. And then next, and then ignore the next ones. Verse 16. These are the places I was referring to, the cities or locations of the Philistines. Verse 16 says Ascalon. So the Philistines saw and returned to Ascalon. That's where they went. In the Septuagint, in the Masoretic, they went to Ekron. Is that the same place? No, we can see the next verse. They are different. So these are the places of the Philistines: Ashdod, Gaza, Ascalon, Gath, Ekron. So they are very different. It's like saying, if they were American, one brought it to New York, one went to Washington. Not the same place. So there's a clear discrepancy there. Two very different places. Verse 18. From the fenced city. Okay, from the fenced city. Where is that? Here it is. From the fenced city to the village of the Perizzite, and to the great stone on which they placed the ark of the covenant of Adonai. So we see being described here the golden mice. Okay, so these are the places belonging to the 5 lords of the Philistines, the 5 Adon of the Philistines, human beings, rulers of the Philistines, and we have a description of specific places. The range of the territory is from the fenced city, okay, that's a specific place, to the village of the Perizzite, specific place with a specific name, and to the great stone on which they placed the Ark of the Covenant. Okay, but in the Masoretic, why I point this out is because it's nebulous in the Masoretic. These are vague places. It's just saying of fenced cities, of country villages. It's like saying from fields to mountains to forests. It's not naming anything. It's just being very vague. Even unto the great stone. Oh, here we go. The great Abel, and stone of was inserted. So what is Abel? In Hebrew, Abel means, literally means a vapor or breath in Hebrew. So the great Abel, the great breath, doesn't make any sense. But in the Greek, I looked it up, didn't look it up in the Septuagint yet. Let me just pause and look it up. Okay, so the original Greek, the Septuagint says, uses the term litho to megalo. So it's it's literally great stone. That's the specific wording, to megalo, or litho megalo. Okay. So we can see it is a stone. It's not a great Abel. Okay, next is, next I'm just going to type this and then pause for. Okay, the next section almost deserves its own video. There's a lot of debate on the internet as to what this means. And there's a big difference in this verse too, just to add to that, the heaviness of this verse. It's probably the hallmark of this video right now. It's going to be this verse. It says, "And the sons of Jeconiah were not pleased with the men of Bethshemesh." So who is Jeconiah? Well, we know he's the king of Israel, but that's not until David, and this is before King David's time. So he's a mysterious figure in this narrative as to who this Jeconiah is. It probably is an individual with the same name. Verses, "And he smote the men of Bethshemesh." So it's he being Adonai. So there's no mention of the sons of Jeconiah. So they were the ones displeased, according to the Septuagint. And then we see here the latter part of the verse, Yah, or Adonai, smote among them, the men of Bethshemesh, 70 men, comma. Okay. Okay, so as I was pointing out, there were 70 men who died from Bethshemesh, And then it says 50,000. But in the Masoretic, it's more confusing because it sounds like 50,070 died of Beth Shemesh, which doesn't make any sense because the population was about, I think, 70,000, give or take. So that is the whole population. Doesn't make any sense because that is a large. Maybe they didn't even have enough people for 50,000. But if you recall in the previous chapter, let me just go there. Chapter 5, verses 6 and 12, it talks about an indiscriminate amount of people dying of the Philistines. So verse 6 says, "And there was a great and indiscriminate mortality in the city." They didn't even provide a number. Verse 12, same deal. There was a very great confusion, and etc. Those who lived and died not were smitten with emerods, and the cry of the city went up to heaven. So we don't get a number until the next chapter. It actually tells us how many died of the Philistines. Just doesn't. The translators did not have the. I don't know what the word is, but they just didn't feel to put a parenthetical statement of the Philistines for 50,000. Otherwise, it would make more sense. There would not be so much confusion surrounding this verse 19. So if we put in parentheses here, just after smote among them of Beth Shemesh 70 men and 50,000 men in brackets of the Philistines, right here where the cursor is, and 50,000 men of the Philistines. Okay, so you're gonna see differing opinions on this, but that one actually makes the most sense, and a lot of people do agree that it is only 70 that died, and that 70 men alone is quite a hit to take for a community. 50,000, that's more of a population, like of a larger population such as the Philistines, perhaps. That would make sense why they would seek a emergency sort of they would do anything at that point to get this ark out of there. After 50,000 people died, just get this thing out of here. They can see how much damage and destruction was caused because of that ark. Whereas 70 is still a big hit too, but 50,000 makes sense that the 50,000 being referred to are those of the Philistines. Okay, so that's all I'll say about that. Won't have to do a separate video on that, I don't think. Verse 20, we see who shall be able to pass before versus stand before. Okay, and then it's talking about the ark. To whom shall the ark of Adonai go up from us versus, and to whom shall he go up from us? So it's either talking about a person or I don't know what, but it's talking about a he, an individual. So in the Septuagint, it's saying who will take the ark off our hands versus who is the man who will go up to present himself before Adonai on our behalf. So who will be the intercessor? Who will be the mediator for us? Verse 21 is an answer not to the Masoretic, but to the Septuagint. Who's going to take the ark from our hands? Who's going to take it away from us? And it says here, the inhabitants of Kirjath Yearim. That's their answer. They sent messengers to them, and so take it. But we don't know what they answered. We'll find out in the next chapter. So having said all that, thank you very much for your time. We'll meet up again, 1 Samuel 7. Until then, Shalom Aleichem, Assalamu Alaikum, Erini Mazisu, Pax Vobiscum, and peace be unto you. Maranatha.